Among history's most remarkable figures, Adolf Hitler was born on the 20th of April in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, Austria. How did a man from a small town become one of the most notorious leaders in history? What events in his early life shaped his dark path and led him to power? Please watch my full video until the end to understand how this troubled individual's path led to global devastation. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay informed. Thank you. Now, let us dive into the full story. Adolf Hitler's family was relatively modest. His father, Alois Hitler, was a customs official, and his mother, Clara, was a housewife. Despite his father's strict nature, Adolf had a close bond with his mother and was deeply affected by her death in 1889. This tragic loss contributed to the emotional struggles that would define much of his life. After high school, Hitler moved to Vienna, where he faced many difficulties in making a living as an artist. His rejection from the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts in 1896 was a major blow to his self-esteem. These years of hardship in Vienna fueled his growing interest in nationalism and racial ideologies, which would later become the driving forces behind his rise to power. Adolf Hitler's early years of failure, loss, and rejection would influence his later worldview and ambitions. These experiences would pave the way for his involvement in World War I, where he served as a soldier. After the war, he joined the German Workers' Party, which would eventually evolve into the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler's rise to power was not an accident. It was the result of careful planning, manipulation, and a deep understanding of Germany's political and social struggles. After the defeat in World War I, Germany was in chaos, facing economic troubles and political instability. Hitler saw this as an opportunity and joined the German Workers' Party in 1919, which later became the Nazi Party. Through his powerful speeches, Hitler quickly gained support. His ability to inspire people with promises of national greatness and a return to German pride was unmatched. By 1933, Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany. From there, he used his position to manipulate the political system, remove opposition, and gain complete control. One of his most significant achievements was the establishment of the Third Reich, a totalitarian state where he became the ultimate authority. He implemented policies that aimed to strengthen Germany's economy, such as rearmament and large infrastructure projects like the Autobahn. Hitler's aggressive foreign policy also led to the expansion of German territory, starting with the remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936 and the annexation of Austria in 1938. However, his most infamous achievement was his role in initiating World War II. By invading Poland in 1939, Hitler triggered a global conflict that would reshape the world forever. His ideologies and actions led to the deaths of millions, as he sought to dominate Europe and eliminate those he deemed undesirable, including Jews, Romani people, and others. Adolf Hitler's death marked the end of a brutal era for Germany and the world. As World War II turned against him, the German military was in retreat on all fronts. By April 1945, the Allies had advanced into Germany, and Berlin was surrounded by Soviet forces. Hitler, who had been living in his underground bunker in Berlin for months, knew that defeat was inevitable. On the 30th of April in 1945, Adolf Hitler took his own life, along with his wife, Eva Braun. They both died in the Efra bunker, located deep beneath the Reich Chancellery. Hitler consumed a cyanide capsule and also shot himself in the head. Eva Braun took cyanide as well. Their bodies were found by their staff, and the remains were quickly burned to prevent them from being publicly displayed. Hitler's suicide marked the effective collapse of the Nazi regime. Shortly afterward, German military officials began to surrender. On the 7th of May, Germany officially surrendered to the Allies, bringing an end to the war in Europe. The death of Hitler symbolized the ultimate downfall of a dictator whose ambitions had led to immense suffering and destruction across the continent. Hitler's death did not bring immediate peace to the world, but it brought a significant step closer to the end of the Holocaust, the devastation of Europe, and the horrors wrought by his regime. His passing left a nation in shambles, and the world struggled to process the aftermath of his actions and the scale of the destruction he caused. The news of Adolf Hitler's death spread quickly across the globe, and reactions were mixed. In Germany, many were left in shock and confusion. Some believed that Hitler's death would signal the end of the war, while others feared that it would lead to even more chaos. For the rest of the world, Hitler's passing was seen as a major turning point, marking the end of the Nazi regime. In the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union, the news was greeted with a sense of relief and hope. For the soldiers who had fought on the front lines, Hitler's death was a symbol of victory and the possibility of peace after years of brutal conflict. The Allies celebrated the end of Nazi rule and began focusing on rebuilding Europe and confronting the remaining Axis powers, including Japan. In the months that followed, the Allies continued their efforts to dismantle the Nazi regime. Many Nazi leaders were captured or fled, and war crimes trials, including the Nuremberg trials, were held to bring perpetrators of the Holocaust and other war crimes to justice. The aftermath of Hitler's death was not just about the end of a war, but the beginning of a long process of healing, reconciliation, and rebuilding for Germany and the world. The death of Hitler marked the collapse of the Third Reich and left a scar on Europe's history. The world would never forget the devastation caused by his actions and the millions of lives lost during his reign. The death of Adolf Hitler in April 1945 marked the end of an era, but it also triggered a profound shift in global politics. With the fall of Nazi Germany, the European map was redrawn and new powers began to emerge. The United States and the Soviet Union, who had once been allies against the Axis powers, now found themselves in direct opposition, setting the stage for the Cold War. The immediate aftermath of World War II saw the beginning of efforts to rebuild Germany and the rest of Europe. The Allies divided Germany into 4 occupation zones controlled by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. Berlin, the capital, was similarly divided. This division not only reflected the geopolitical tensions between the former Allies, but also foreshadowed the split that would come to define much of the second half of the 20th century. The devastation caused by Hitler's policies and the Holocaust also prompted the creation of international organizations aimed at preventing future atrocities. The United Nations was founded in 1945 with the goal of promoting peace, security, and cooperation between nations. Its formation marked a commitment to a new world order where the horrors of Nazi Germany would never be repeated. The political landscape of Europe was reshaped as former Axis powers like Italy and Japan were also forced to reckon with their pasts. Germany's role as a global power was effectively ended, while the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the 2 dominant superpowers, leading to a new era of global competition and ideological struggle. The end of the war in Europe came after months of intense fighting, as the Allies closed in on Germany from both the West and the East. In April 1945, Soviet forces had surrounded Berlin, while the Western Allies, led by the United States, were advancing through Germany. The once powerful Nazi regime was collapsing under the weight of its own defeat. On the 7th of May, 1945, Germany officially surrendered to the Allied forces. This surrender was signed in Reims, France, and marked the end of Nazi control over Europe. However, the formal surrender ceremony took place on the 8th of May, which became known as Victory in Europe Day. On this day, cities across Europe erupted in celebration, as the long and brutal war finally came to an end. The surrender of Germany marked a decisive moment in the war, but it also set the stage for the post-war era. The Allies began to divide Germany into occupation zones, with each of the four powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union, taking control of a section. Berlin, the capital, was also divided into four sectors, despite being located deep within the Soviet zone. This division would later become one of the major flashpoints of the Cold War. The end of the war in Europe left the continent in ruins. Millions of people were dead or displaced, and much of Europe's infrastructure had been destroyed. The devastation left by the war would require decades of rebuilding, and Europe's political and economic systems would be forever changed. The United States played a critical role in the outcome of World War II. Initially, the United States had maintained a policy of neutrality, refusing to directly engage in the conflict. However, as the war intensified and the Axis powers made significant territorial gains, the United States began to shift its stance, ultimately entering the war in December 1941, following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The United States' entry into the war marked a turning point. The country rapidly mobilized its resources and became a powerful military and economic force. It provided significant military aid to its allies through programs like Lend-Lease, sending weapons, supplies, and equipment to countries like Britain, the Soviet Union, and China, which were already engaged in fighting the Axis powers. This support was essential in sustaining the Allied war effort, and was one of the main reasons the Axis was ultimately defeated. In addition to its economic contributions, the United States also provided key military forces to the European and Pacific theaters. In Europe, the United States participated in the D-Day invasion of Normandy in June 1944, which led to the liberation of France and the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the United States fought a brutal campaign against Japan, leading to key victories at Midway and Iwo Jima, ultimately resulting in Japan's surrender in August 1945. The United States' involvement in the war not only helped secure the defeat of the Axis powers, but also solidified the country as a global superpower. After the war, the United States became a key player in shaping the post-war world order, promoting democracy and capitalism, while also establishing international organizations like the United Nations to prevent future conflicts. The Soviet Union played an indispensable role in the defeat of Nazi Germany during World War II. As the war escalated, the Soviet Union became one of the primary Allied forces fighting against the Axis, particularly on the Eastern Front. Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union in June 1941, under Operation Barbarossa, marked a turning point in the war, as the Soviet Union found itself fighting for survival. Initially, the German invasion made significant progress, pushing deep into Soviet territory. Cities like Kiev and Smolensk fell to the Germans, and the siege of Leningrad lasted for nearly 3 years, with millions of Soviet civilians and soldiers suffering and dying. Despite these early setbacks, the Soviet Union's resilience began to show. Under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, the Soviets managed to regroup, and by late 1942, they launched a series of counteroffensives. The Battle of Stalingrad, which began in the summer of 1942 and ended in February 1943, was a decisive turning point in the war. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad marked the first major defeat of the German army and shifted the balance of power in favor of the Allies. From then on, the Soviet Union pushed westward, liberating Soviet territory and eventually advancing into Eastern Europe and Germany itself. The Soviet Union's contribution extended beyond the battlefield. The Red Army's sacrifices were immense, with an estimated 27 million Soviet citizens dying during the war, including millions of soldiers and civilians. The Soviet victory at the Battle of Berlin in April and May of 1945 played a critical role in the final defeat of Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union was instrumental in shaping the post-war landscape of Europe. The Pacific theater of World War II was a major front, where the United States and its allies fought against the Empire of Japan. The war in the Pacific was defined by naval battles, island-hopping campaigns, and the brutal struggle for control over the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean and its islands. The conflict began in earnest with Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, 1941, which led to the United States' formal entry into the war. After the attack, the United States, along with the Allies, quickly shifted its focus to countering Japan's territorial ambitions in Asia and the Pacific. The early years of the war saw Japan expand rapidly, occupying much of Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and various Pacific islands. However, by 1942, the tide began to turn in favor of the Allies with key victories at the Battle of Midway and the Battle of the Coral Sea. These battles marked the beginning of a series of successful offensives against Japanese forces. The United States adopted an island-hopping strategy, capturing key islands in the Pacific and using them as stepping stones to get closer to Japan. Major battles, such as the Battle of Guadalcanal and the Battle of Iwo Jima, were hard-fought and costly, but they weakened Japan's strategic position. The United States also began a relentless bombing campaign against Japan's cities and infrastructure, aiming to break Japan's will to continue fighting. The war in the Pacific culminated in the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. Faced with these devastating attacks and the imminent invasion of Japan, the Japanese government announced its surrender on the 15th of August, officially ending World War II. The decline of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, was inevitable, as the tide of war turned against them in the latter years of World War II. By 1943, the Allies had gained significant victories on both the European and Pacific fronts, putting immense pressure on the Axis nations and weakening their ability to continue fighting. In Europe, Germany's losses mounted after key defeats at Stalingrad and the Battle of El Alamein. The Soviet Union's successful counteroffensive after Stalingrad pushed the German forces back on the Eastern Front, while the Allied invasion of Italy in 1943 further strained German resources. The D-Day invasion of Normandy in June 1944 was another devastating blow to Nazi Germany, opening a new front in Western Europe and forcing the Germans to fight a 2-front war. Italy's position became increasingly precarious as well. Following a series of defeats in North Africa and Italy, Mussolini's fascist government collapsed in July 1943. The Italians signed an armistice with the Allies, though German forces quickly occupied much of Italy and fought bitterly to maintain control. Mussolini was eventually captured and executed in April 1945, marking the final end of Italian fascism. In the Pacific, Japan faced similar setbacks. By 1944, the United States had crippled the Japanese Navy at the Battle of Midway and had captured key islands across the Pacific. Japan's ability to defend its empire was steadily diminishing, and the Allied bombing campaigns devastated Japanese cities and industry. Despite fierce resistance, Japan was unable to stop the advance of Allied forces. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 led to Japan's unconditional surrender and the collapse of the Axis powers. The Holocaust remains one of the darkest chapters in human history, where Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime systematically attempted to exterminate the Jewish population, as well as other groups deemed undesirable, such as Romani people, disabled individuals, political opponents, and others. The genocide began shortly after Hitler came to power in 1933, but it reached its horrific peak during World War II. The Nazi government implemented a policy of widespread persecution, which escalated from social exclusion and discrimination to mass murder. In 1941, with the invasion of the Soviet Union, Nazi forces began what they called the Final Solution, a plan to annihilate the Jewish population of Europe. Millions were transported to concentration camps, where they were either worked to death, starved, or killed in gas chambers. Among the most infamous of these camps was Auschwitz, where an estimated 1 million Jews perished. Other death camps, such as Treblinka and Sobibor, also became sites of unimaginable suffering. The Nazis also used mobile killing units, called Einsatzgruppen, to carry out mass shootings, particularly in Eastern Europe. In addition to the Holocaust, civilians throughout Europe suffered greatly during the war. The war's widespread destruction led to the displacement of millions of people. Cities were bombed, leading to enormous civilian casualties, while famine, disease, and lack of shelter worsened the plight of the people. In occupied territories, resistance movements fought back against the Axis, but many were brutally suppressed, with entire communities being wiped out. The Holocaust and the immense suffering of civilians during World War II left a lasting scar on Europe. In its aftermath, the world came together to establish international laws and organizations aimed at preventing such atrocities from ever happening again. The role of technology and weapons in World War II cannot be overstated. The war saw incredible advancements in military technology that changed the nature of combat and warfare forever. From tanks and airplanes to weapons of mass destruction, the innovation that emerged during this period had a profound impact on the outcome of the war and the future of global military conflicts. One of the most significant technological advancements during the war was the development of radar, which helped both the Allies and the Axis detect enemy aircraft and ships. This was especially crucial during the Battle of Britain in 1940, where radar played a key role in allowing the Royal Air Force to defend against German Luftwaffe attacks. Similarly, new aircraft designs, such as the American B-17 Flying Fortress and the British Spitfire, gave both sides powerful tools for air superiority. On the ground, tanks became more powerful and mobile, with the German Panzer and the Soviet T-34 leading the way. The use of tanks allowed for more fluid and aggressive offensives, particularly during the Blitzkrieg tactics employed by Germany early in the war. These machines could move quickly across terrain, crushing opposition and providing crucial support for infantry units. The most destructive technology, however, came with the development of the atomic bomb. The United States' secret Manhattan Project led to the creation of nuclear weapons, and in August 1945, bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, hastening Japan's surrender. This marked the first and only use of nuclear weapons in war, and demonstrated the terrifying power of modern scientific advances. These technological advancements reshaped warfare and set the stage for future conflicts, while also introducing new questions about the ethical implications of such powerful weapons. While the major powers of World War II were the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and Germany, many other nations also played important roles in the conflict. These countries contributed to the war in various ways, either by actively participating in military operations, providing resources, or supporting the war effort through diplomacy. One of the key nations involved was Japan, which sought to expand its empire in Asia and the Pacific. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 brought the United States into the war. Japan had already invaded China in the 1930s, and by the early 1940s, it had conquered large portions of Southeast Asia. The Axis powers, which included Italy and Germany, supported Japan in its quest for dominance. Though Italy's involvement was less significant as the war progressed, China also played a crucial role in the Pacific theater. Even before the official start of World War II, Japan had been attacking and occupying parts of China, The Chinese nationalist forces, led by Chiang Kai-shek, fought a prolonged and brutal war against Japan. Despite being a victim of Japanese aggression, China's involvement in the war was significant, and its resistance tied down large numbers of Japanese troops, helping to relieve pressure on Allied forces in the Pacific. In Europe, countries like France and Poland were invaded and occupied by Nazi forces. However, these nations continued to resist, with France forming the Free French Forces under General Charles de Gaulle. The Polish government in exile worked with the Allies, providing intelligence and military support, despite their country being divided between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Many smaller nations, such as Belgium, the Netherlands, and Norway, also fought back against Axis occupation, forming resistance movements that played a key role in disrupting German operations. Other countries, such as Australia, Canada, India, and New Zealand, contributed significantly to the Allied war effort, providing troops, resources, and support to the European and Pacific fronts. World War II came to an end in the summer of 1945, after years of intense fighting across multiple continents. The final days of the war saw the collapse of Nazi Germany and the surrender of Japan, marking the end of the global conflict that had claimed millions of lives and altered the course of history. In Europe, the war effectively ended with the surrender of Germany on the 7th of May, 1945. This came after months of relentless Allied offensives from the West and Soviet advances from the East. Berlin, the German capital, was captured by Soviet forces in April, and on the 8th of May, the Allies celebrated Victory in Europe Day, marking the official defeat of Nazi Germany. However, the end of the war in Europe did not mean the end of World War II. In the Pacific, Japan continued to fight, refusing to surrender. The United States had been waging a brutal campaign against Japan, and after years of intense battles and island hopping, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. These bombings, combined with the Soviet Union declaring war on Japan and invading Japanese-held Manchuria, led Japan to announce its unconditional surrender on the 15th of August, 1945. The formal surrender was signed on the 2nd of September, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, bringing the war to a close. The end of World War II was a turning point in history, reshaping the global order. It led to the creation of the United Nations, aimed at preventing future global conflicts, and set the stage for the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The conclusion of World War II left a profound impact on the world. The war not only reshaped borders and political alliances, but also forever changed the social and economic structures of many nations. In its wake, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the world's two superpowers, marking the beginning of the Cold War. The war also led to the establishment of the United Nations, an organization designed to promote international cooperation and prevent future global conflicts. The legacy of World War II can still be felt today. The war prompted technological advancements, including the development of nuclear weapons and the rapid growth of aviation and radar technologies. These advancements, while aiding in military strategies during the war, also had far-reaching effects on civilian industries and modern life. The war's aftermath also led to significant movements for independence in colonized nations. The destruction caused by the war weakened European powers, paving the way for the decolonization of Africa and Asia. Many former colonies gained their independence in the decades following the war, forever changing the global landscape. The horrors of the Holocaust and the suffering of civilians during the war also led to greater awareness of human rights. Efforts to ensure such atrocities never occur again have been a central focus of global policy since the war, including the establishment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. World War II left a lasting legacy of resilience, tragedy, and hope. It was a defining moment in history that shaped the modern world and continues to influence global politics and society today. Thank you very much for watching.